Abstract, the personal meaning penalty describes the psychological and performance costs incurred when employees' work misaligns with their core values, sense of purpose, or desired impact. Unlike traditional engagement metrics, this penalty persists even when individuals perform competently and achieve external success. Drawing on self determination theory, eudaimonic well being research, and organizational psychology, this article examines how meaning misalignment manifests, its cascading consequences for both individuals and organizations, and evidence based interventions for addressing it. Analysis reveals that the meaning penalty disproportionately affects mid career professionals, knowledge workers, and those who prioritized extrinsic rewards over intrinsic alignment. Organizational responses that demonstrate effectiveness include values alignment processes, job crafting initiatives, purpose driven communication, and structural accommodations for meaning making. The article concludes with frameworks for building sustainable meaning infrastructure that benefits both individual flourishing and organizational performance. A senior marketing director at a Fortune 500 consumer goods company recently described her situation. On paper, I've made it. Six-figure salary, impressive title, respect from peers. But I wake up every Monday feeling like I'm betraying myself. We're optimizing consumption patterns for products nobody needs while the climate crisis accelerates. I'm excellent at what I do, which somehow makes it worse. This represents a distinctly modern professional paradox. She experiences what might be termed the personal meaning penalty, the accumulated psychological, emotional, and performance costs of sustained misalignment between one's work and one's deeply held values or sense of purpose. Unlike poor job fit, lack of skills, or toxic work environments, the meaning penalty persists even amid competent performance, adequate compensation, and respectful treatment. The phenomenon has intensified as knowledge work has displaced manual labor, as educational attainment has risen, and as societal conversations increasingly emphasize purpose and impact alongside traditional career success. According to McKinsey's research on the Great Attrition, 70% of employees report that their sense of purpose is largely defined by work, yet fewer than half feel their organization helps them live that purpose. DeSmet et al., 2021. This gap represents not merely dissatisfaction, but a fundamental misalignment that exacts ongoing costs. Understanding the personal meaning penalty matters now because the traditional social contract, exchange labor for wages, advancement, and security, no longer adequately addresses what drives human motivation and well being. Organizations face productivity paradoxes, where capable employees underperform, retention challenges, where valued talent departs despite competitive compensation, and engagement plateaus that resist conventional interventions. Meanwhile, individuals experience what Frankel, 1985, termed the existential vacuum, a sense of inner emptiness despite outer achievement. This article examines the personal meaning penalty through both scholarly evidence and organizational practice, offering frameworks for recognizing, measuring, and addressing meaning misalignment before its costs become unsustainable. The workplace meaning landscape, defining personal meaning in work contexts. Personal meaning in work extends beyond job satisfaction or engagement. Stedger et al., 2012, distinguish between meaningful work, work experienced as significant and purposeful, and meaning in work, the broader sense that one's working life contributes to personal fulfillment and identity. The personal meaning penalty emerges specifically from the latter, a misalignment between who someone fundamentally is or aspires to be and what their actual work demands or represents. Rosso et al., 2010, identified four primary pathways through which work becomes meaningful: authenticity, expressing one's true self, self efficacy, feeling competent and capable, self esteem, feeling valued, and purpose, contributing to something beyond oneself. The meaning penalty arises when these pathways are blocked or contradicted. Someone might demonstrate high self efficacy at tasks they find morally questionable, creating a particularly pernicious form of misalignment. Critically, meaning is subjective and personal. What constitutes meaningful work for one person may feel empty to another. A financial analyst might find deep meaning in enabling capital allocation that supports innovation, while a colleague with identical skills might experience their work as divorced from tangible human benefit. The penalty emerges from the gap between this individual's values and their work, not from some objective assessment of the work's societal value. This personal nature, makes the meaning penalty both more difficult to address systematically and more painful to experience individually. When compensation is inadequate, the solution is clearer. When meaning is absent, the path forward requires deeper self examination and often more substantial organizational or career restructuring. Prevalence, drivers, and distribution. Research suggests the personal meaning penalty is both widespread and unevenly distributed. Gallup's State of the Global Workplace report found that only 20% of employees worldwide feel engaged at work, but engagement represents only one dimension of the meaning challenge. Gallup, 2022. Studies specifically examining meaningful work find approximately 50% of workers report their jobs provide a sense of meaning. Lipswiersma and Wright, 2012, suggesting roughly half the workforce may experience some degree of meaning misalignment. Several factors drive the contemporary prevalence of meaning penalties. Educational expansion and rising expectations. As Inglehart and Welzel, 2005, documented, economic development shifts populations from survival values toward self expression values, including expectations that work should provide not just income but personal fulfillment. College educated workers particularly expect work to align with identity and values, having been socialized to find their passion rather than simply secure employment. Financialization and metrics driven cultures. Organizations increasingly optimize for shareholder value and quantifiable metrics, sometimes at the expense of broader purpose or social contribution. Employees whose values emphasize human welfare, environmental sustainability, or community benefit may find these sidelined in cultures dominated by quarterly earnings targets. Stout, 2012. Information asymmetry and delayed discovery. Many professionals make career decisions with limited information about daily work realities, organizational culture, or long term trajectories. The meaning penalty often surfaces only after years of investment, when switching costs feel prohibitive and identities have already been shaped around particular career paths. Mid career reevaluation. Developmental psychology suggests meaning making becomes more salient in midlife as individuals shift from achievement focused to legacy focused concerns. Levinson, 1978. Professionals who successfully climbed hierarchies based on external validation often encounter existential questions about whether their success actually matters to them. The personal meaning penalty distributes unevenly across populations and sectors. Knowledge workers face higher risk because their work involves greater cognitive and emotional investment. Mere competent completion feels insufficient when the work itself feels meaningless. High achieving professionals paradoxically face elevated risk because they've often optimized for external success markers, prestige, compensation, advancement, while deprioritizing internal alignment. Certain industries, including finance, law, consulting, and advertising, show higher prevalence, possibly because compensation premiums attract talent whose values don't intrinsically align with the work. Mid career professionals, roughly ages 35 to 50, report higher meaning concerns than either early career workers, still establishing themselves, or late career workers, who have either found alignment or made peace with its absence. Organizational and individual consequences of the meaning penalty. Organizational performance impacts. The personal meaning penalty exacts measurable organizational costs, though these often manifest subtly and accumulate gradually rather than appearing as acute crises. Reduced discretionary effort and innovation. Employees experiencing meaning misalignment perform adequately but rarely exceed expectations. They complete assigned tasks but don't volunteer for challenging projects, propose innovations, or invest emotional energy in problem solving. Research by Shiram, 2003, found that when work lacks personal significance, employees engage in what might be termed strategic incompetence, performing just well enough to avoid negative consequences while preserving energy for domains that do feel meaningful. One study of R&D professionals found that perceived meaningfulness predicted innovation behaviors beyond what engagement or satisfaction explained. Oldham and Hackman, 2010. Elevated turnover among high performers. The meaning penalty particularly affects organizations' most capable employees, those with options and marketability. LinkedIn data analyzed by Chamberlain, 2019, showed that workplace culture, including alignment with company mission, was the single strongest predictor of employee tenure, exceeding compensation in predictive power. When talented professionals leave citing, wanting to make a difference, or pursuing my passion, they're articulating the accumulated meaning penalty. Replacement costs for knowledge workers typically range from 100% to 300% of annual salary, when accounting for lost productivity, recruitment, and training. Baushi and Glynn, 2012. Performance volatility and reduced resilience. Teams experiencing collective meaning misalignment show greater performance variability and less resilience during challenges. When setbacks occur, employees without intrinsic commitment are more likely to disengage or deflect blame rather than persist in problem solving. W.R. Zesniewski and Dutton, 2001, found that employees who found meaning in work demonstrated greater resilience during organizational change and crisis. Cultural deterioration and cynicism. The meaning penalty is socially contagious. When respected colleagues visibly go through motions without genuine investment, cynicism spreads. Organizations develop cultures where everyone implicitly understands we're just here for the paycheck, undermining collaboration, psychological safety, and collective purpose. This cultural erosion shows up in metrics like declining employee referrals, reduced participation in voluntary initiatives, and increased conflict over resource allocation. Talent attraction challenges. As meaning expectations rise, particularly among younger professionals, organizations known for meaning misalignment face recruiting disadvantages. Employer brand research by Universum found that among the top drivers attracting talent, meaningful work ranked second only to competitive compensation, and first among younger demographics, Universum, 2020. Organizations cannot simply outbid for talent when candidates prioritize alignment over income. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts. For individuals, the meaning penalty manifests across psychological, physical, and relational domains, with costs that accumulate over time. Chronic psychological distress. Meaning misalignment creates sustained cognitive dissonance, the tension between self-concept, I care about social justice, and daily behavior, I optimize tax avoidance for corporations. Festinger's 1957 foundational work on cognitive dissonance showed that such contradictions generate psychological discomfort that individuals attempt to resolve, often through rationalization, denial, or eventual behavioral change. When resolution proves difficult, anxiety and depressive symptoms increase. A longitudinal study by Allen et al. 2019 found that low work meaningfulness predicted increased depression and anxiety over subsequent years, even controlling for other work stressors. Emotional exhaustion distinct from traditional burnout. The meaning penalty produces a particular form of exhaustion. Individuals can complete tasks competently, but experience profound depletion. Unlike burnout from overwork, this exhaustion stems from the ongoing effort required to motivate oneself toward activities that feel fundamentally hollow. Maslach and later, 2008, distinguished this inefficacy dimension of burnout, where despite adequate performance, individuals feel their work lacks significance. Identity fragmentation and erosion. Sustained meaning misalignment forces individuals to compartmentalize identity. They become skilled at performing a professional role that doesn't reflect their authentic self. Over time, this compartmentalization can erode the sense of an integrated, coherent identity. Ibera, 1999, studied professionals navigating identity transitions and found that prolonged performance of inauthentic professional identities led to identity confusion and reduced self-clarity. Physical health consequences. The stress of meaning misalignment shows measurable physical effects. Research on eudaimonic well-being derived from meaning and purpose, demonstrates that lack of purpose correlates with increased inflammation markers, cardiovascular disease risk, and mortality. Cole et al., 2015. A study tracking over 12,000 adults found that higher purpose in life predicted reduced mortality risk over 14 years, with effects independent of other psychosocial factors. Boyle et al., 2009. Relationship strain and spillover. The meaning penalty doesn't respect work-life boundaries. Individuals experiencing meaning misalignment often bring home emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and identity confusion that affect family relationships. Partners may struggle to understand why someone who appears successful seems increasingly unhappy. Children internalize messages about work as something to endure rather than something that can be fulfilling. Conversely, some individuals overcompensate by seeking all meaning and identity from non work domains, creating unrealistic pressures on relationships and leisure activities. Opportunity costs and regret. Perhaps most poignantly, years spent in work that lacks personal meaning represent time not invested in alternatives that might have provided fulfillment. Research on life regrets consistently finds that people regret inactions more than actions, and regret not pursuing meaningful paths more than failures in pursuit of meaning. Jilovich and Medvec, 1995. The meaning penalty compounds as individuals realize not only that their current work feels empty, but that years of accumulated expertise, professional identity, and financial commitments have made course correction increasingly difficult. Evidence based organizational responses. Organizations can implement several evidence based interventions to prevent, detect, and address the personal meaning penalty. Effective approaches recognize that meaning is personal and subjective, while providing structures and opportunities that enable individuals to construct meaning aligned work experiences. Transparent communication of organizational purpose. Clear articulation of organizational mission, values, and impact enables individuals to assess alignment before joining and to reconnect with purpose during tenure. However, effectiveness depends on authenticity and consistency between stated purpose and actual practice. Research by George et al. 2016 found that when leaders communicated authentic purpose, not just aspirational mission statements, employee commitment increased significantly. Authentic purpose communication involves specificity about how the organization creates value, for whom, and why that matters, rather than generic claims about excellence or innovation. Effective approaches include impact transparency initiatives that make visible the connection between daily work and ultimate beneficiaries. A healthcare analytics firm might show clinical teams' data on patient outcomes improved through their software, or a financial services company might profile small businesses enabled through their lending platform. Values based decision documentation, where significant organizational choices are explained through reference to core values, making abstract principles concrete and demonstrating that they genuinely influence behavior. Realistic work previews during recruiting that honestly portray both meaningful and mundane aspects of roles, preventing meaning misalignment from being discovered only after joining. Regular purpose reconnection through all hands meetings, team discussions, or leadership communications that consistently tie current initiatives to broader organizational purpose. Microsoft under Satya Nadella provides a notable example. When Nadella became CEO in 2014, the company faced cultural challenges including employee cynicism and meaning deficit. Nadella articulated a clear, authentic purpose: empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, and systematically connected product decisions, strategic initiatives, and cultural changes to this purpose. Employee engagement scores improved significantly, with particular gains in measures of meaningful work. Nadella, 2017. Critically, this wasn't mere rhetoric. Strategic shifts like the focus on accessibility features and educational technology tools demonstrated genuine commitment to the stated purpose. Structural job crafting opportunities. Job crafting, the process by which employees redesign their own jobs to better align with values, strengths, and passions, represents a powerful intervention for addressing meaning misalignment. Rather than requiring organizational restructuring, job crafting enables individuals to modify task, relational, and cognitive boundaries of their work. W. R. Zesniewski and Duttons, 2001, foundational research identified three primary forms of crafting: task crafting, changing what work activities one performs or how one performs them; relational crafting, changing whom one interacts with and how; and cognitive crafting, changing how one thinks about or frames the work. Research by Berg et al. 2013 demonstrated that employees who engaged in job crafting reported greater work meaningfulness, with effects persisting over time. Effective organizational support for job crafting includes formally sanctioned flex time for purpose projects where employees dedicate a percentage of work hours, commonly 10 to 20%, to initiatives they find personally meaningful, even if tangential to core responsibilities. Role boundary flexibility that permits employees to emphasize aspects of their role aligned with personal strengths and values, while de-emphasizing or delegating less meaningful components. Collaborative crafting facilitation, where managers help employees identify meaning aligned modifications through structured conversations about values, strengths, and current work design. Recognition and legitimization of crafting efforts through performance management systems that acknowledge and reward employees who successfully craft roles toward greater personal and organizational value. Google's 20% time policy, though now more limited than in earlier years, exemplified structural crafting support. Engineers could dedicate 1 day weekly to projects they found personally meaningful or innovative, even outside their assigned responsibilities. This produced both meaningful work for individuals and organizational value through innovations including Gmail and Google News. Bach, 2015. The policy's effectiveness came partly from formal legitimization. Employees didn't need to bootleg time for meaningful side projects, but received organizational sanction. 3M takes a similar approach through its 15% culture, where technical employees spend time on projects of personal interest. This isn't merely informal tolerance, but embedded in performance expectations and career development. The company frames this as authorized bootlegging that serves both individual meaning making and innovation pipelines. Post it notes emerged from such authorized exploration. Govindarajan and Trimble, 2010. Values alignment assessment and development. Systematic processes for surfacing individual values and assessing alignment with organizational and role characteristics can prevent meaning penalties from developing or becoming entrenched. Cable and Edwards, 2004, demonstrated that value congruence between individuals and organizations predicts job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and turnover beyond what person job fit explains. However, both individuals and organizations often lack structured processes for making values explicit and assessing alignment. Evidence based values alignment approaches include structured values discovery exercises during onboarding, where new employees articulate core values and explore connections between those values and organizational mission. Regular alignment conversations between managers and employees that explicitly address whether current work provides opportunities to express and live personal values. Role transition, values reassessment when employees change roles, where new managers discuss values alignment rather than assuming satisfaction simply from accepting the new position. Values based development planning that shapes career trajectories and skill development toward increasing alignment rather than defaulting to traditional advancement paths that may amplify misalignment. Patagonia has institutionalized values alignment throughout the employee lifecycle. During recruiting, the company explicitly discusses environmental activism and sustainable business practices, selecting candidates who genuinely share these commitments rather than merely tolerating them. Development conversations routinely address how roles might evolve to deepen environmental impact. The company offers environmental internship programs where employees can temporarily work for environmental nonprofits while remaining on Patagonia's payroll. Chouinard and Stanley, 2012. These practices prevent meaning penalties by ensuring alignment from hiring onward and providing outlets when alignment naturally shifts. The accounting and consulting firm KPMG implemented a values alignment intervention called Higher Purpose Initiative after discovering that many employees struggled to find meaning in audit and tax work. The initiative involved having employees write and share stories about how their work ultimately served clients and communities. Over 40,000 employees participated, and the company saw significant improvements in pride, commitment, and meaningfulness scores. Pontefract, 2016. The intervention worked by helping employees cognitively reframe technical work as ultimately contributing to market trust and business integrity, connecting tasks to broader purpose. Meaning aligned performance and reward systems. Traditional performance, management, and compensation systems often inadvertently penalize meaning aligned choices while rewarding purely financial or status driven behaviors. Redesigning these systems can reduce meaning penalties. Research by Desai and Ryan, 2000, on self determination theory found that extrinsic rewards can actually undermine intrinsic motivation when they shift focus from inherent satisfaction to external validation. However, when reward systems recognize and reinforce meaning aligned contributions rather than replacing intrinsic motivation, they can support rather than undermine meaningful work. Effective redesign approaches include dual metric performance systems that evaluate both conventional productivity/results and contribution to organizational mission or values, preventing employees from facing trade offs between meaning and advancement. Meaning aligned incentives such as bonuses tied to social impact metrics, time off for volunteer work, or educational stipends for purpose aligned learning. Recognition programs highlighting meaningful contributions that publicly acknowledge employees whose work exemplified organizational values or created non financial impact. Career path diversification that creates advancement opportunities outside traditional management hierarchies, enabling employees to deepen expertise in meaningful domains rather than accepting management roles for advancement. Salesforce implemented an integrated performance and impact system that evaluates employees on both business results and contributions to the company's one-to-one-to-one model, dedicating 1% of equity, 1% of product, and 1% of employee time to community benefit. Employees who actively engage with the philanthropic mission receive recognition in performance reviews, and volunteer time is tracked and celebrated. This prevents meaning aligned activities from being squeezed out by competing business priorities and signals that the stated commitment to social good isn't merely aspirational. Benioff and Langley, 2004. Novo Nordisk, the pharmaceutical company, redesigned its performance management to explicitly incorporate the company's triple bottom line commitment: financial, social, environmental. Managers and employees set objectives across all three dimensions, and advancement depends on balanced performance rather than purely financial results. This prevents executives from facing career penalties for prioritizing environmental sustainability or healthcare access initiatives, even when these create short term financial trade offs. Morsing and Oswald, 2009. Psychological contracting and reciprocity reconstruction. The psychological contract, the unwritten, subjective beliefs about mutual obligations between employee and employer, fundamentally shapes meaning at work. When employees believe they're giving more meaning aligned contributions than they receive in return, the meaning penalty intensifies. Rousseau's 1995 foundational work showed that psychological contract violations predict negative outcomes, including reduced commitment, performance declines, and turnover. In meaning contexts, violations occur when organizations implicitly promise purpose or impact that doesn't materialize, or when employees invest in meaning aligned work without receiving adequate organizational support or recognition. Approaches for healthier psychological contracting include explicit reciprocity discussions, where organizations and employees openly negotiate what each offers and expects, including non traditional elements like meaning, growth, and autonomy. Iterative contract renegotiation, recognizing that values and meaning sources evolve over career stages, requiring periodic realignment rather than assuming a static agreement. Transparent constraint acknowledgement, where organizations honestly communicate limitations on meaning aligned work rather than implying unlimited support. Exit with dignity pathways that recognize when alignment has genuinely dissolved and enable graceful transitions rather than forcing prolonged misalignment. Netflix's culture of radical honesty and explicit psychological contracting illustrates this approach. The company explicitly articulates what it offers: autonomy, high compensation, talented colleagues, freedom from organizational bureaucracy, and what it expects: exceptional performance, alignment with company needs, self management. When alignment breaks, whether from performance or fit issues, transitions happen quickly and respectfully. While demanding, this clarity prevents prolonged meaning penalties from hidden misalignment. McCord, 2014. Employees know what they're signing up for rather than discovering misalignment only after years of investment. Building long-term organizational meaning infrastructure. Beyond tactical interventions, organizations can build systemic capabilities that prevent meaning penalties from emerging and support ongoing meaning making across the workforce. Distributed meaning making structures. Rather than concentrating meaning creation in leadership or human resources, Effective organizations distribute meaning-making capacity throughout hierarchies and functions. Research by Grant, 2012, demonstrated that when frontline employees understand how their work benefits ultimate beneficiaries, motivation and performance increase significantly. However, this requires structural mechanisms for making impact visible and connecting contributors to contribution. Infrastructure components include beneficiary connection programs that create regular, direct contact between employees and those who benefit from organizational products or services. Cross-functional meaning amplification teams composed of employees from various levels and departments who identify and communicate impact stories. Peer meaning-making communities where employees share how they've found or created meaning in their work, providing models and inspiration. Transparent impact measurement that tracks and shares non-financial outcomes alongside traditional business metrics, making the why continuously visible. Medtronic, the medical technology company, holds an annual ceremony where patients whose lives were saved or improved by Medtronic devices speak directly to employees who designed, manufactured, and sold those products. This creates visceral connection between daily engineering tasks and human impact. The company also regularly shares patient stories across the organization. Research on these practices found significant increases in meaningfulness perceptions and commitment. Grant, 2012. Kaiser Permanente implemented meaning-making rounds, where clinical and administrative teams periodically discuss specific cases where their collective work made significant patient impact. These aren't traditional case reviews focused on clinical protocols, but explicit discussions of how various roles contributed to meaningful outcomes. The practice helps administrative staff, who rarely see patients, directly understand their connection to healthcare delivery. Purpose evolution and adaptive capacity. Organizational purpose cannot remain static in dynamic environments. Meaning infrastructure includes capability for purpose evolution that maintains core values while adapting to changing contexts. Quinn and Thacker, 2018, argued that organizations with authentic purpose maintain a stable core identity while continuously reinterpreting how that purpose manifests in current contexts. Static purpose statements become hollow, adaptive purpose remains vital. Adaptive purpose infrastructure includes regular purpose review processes, where leadership and employees collectively examine whether stated purpose still reflects actual organizational activity and whether it still resonates. Scenario-based purpose testing that explores how core values would guide decisions in hypothetical future contexts, building muscle for purpose application. Diversity of purpose interpretation that permits different departments or teams to connect to organizational purpose through different pathways rather than imposing monolithic meaning. Transparent purpose tensions, where leadership openly discusses trade-offs between purpose dimensions, e.g., environmental sustainability versus accessibility/affordability, rather than pretending all values always align. Unilever provides an example of purpose evolution. The company's sustainable living plan articulated ambitious environmental and social goals while maintaining commercial objectives. As context changed, climate urgency increased, social inequality rose. The company evolved specific targets and initiatives while maintaining core commitment to sustainable business. Importantly, the company publicly acknowledged tensions between sustainability and growth objectives in certain markets, demonstrating authentic grappling rather than superficial greenwashing. Paulman and Winston, 2021. Developmental pathways and meaning across career stages. Recognition that meaning sources and priorities evolve across career stages enables organizations to support shifting needs rather than assuming uniform approaches work universally. Supers, 1980, career development theory, identified distinct stages from exploration through maintenance to disengagement, each with different developmental tasks and meaning sources. Organizational meaning infrastructure should accommodate this developmental variation. Stage-responsive approaches include early career meaning through learning and capability building, providing opportunities to develop expertise and discover strengths rather than expecting immediate purpose clarity. Mid-career meaning through increasing autonomy and impact scope, recognizing that established professionals often seek greater influence and strategic contribution. Late career meaning through legacy and mentorship, creating pathways for experienced employees to shape organizational culture and develop next generations. Transition support across meaning reorientations, including career coaching, sabbaticals, or role redesign when individuals' meaning sources fundamentally shift. Deloitte's mass career customization framework allows employees to dial various work dimensions pace, workload, location, role, up or down across career stages. This recognizes that optimal work design shifts as life circumstances and meaning priorities evolve. An early career consultant might maximize pace and workload to build skills, while a mid career colleague with young children might reduce pace to allow parenting engagement, and a late career partner might shift toward mentorship roles. Benko and Weisberg, 2007. This flexibility prevents meaning penalties that emerge when organizational expectations remain static while individual needs evolve. Conclusion: the personal meaning penalty represents a critical, yet often underrecognized challenge in contemporary work. Unlike traditional organizational problems with clear, measurable symptoms, meaning misalignment accumulates quietly, manifesting initially as subtle energy drain, reduced discretionary effort, and psychological discomfort before eventually precipitating more visible crises of burnout, turnover, or performance failure. For organizations, the costs are substantial: reduced innovation, elevated turnover among high performers, cultural deterioration, and recruitment disadvantages. For individuals, the costs are existential: chronic psychological distress, identity erosion, relationship strain, and the compound burden of time spent in work that doesn't reflect or support who they fundamentally are or aspire to be. Yet the meaning penalty is neither inevitable nor irreversible. Evidence-based interventions demonstrate that organizations can prevent, detect, and address meaning misalignment through transparent purpose communication, structural support for job crafting, values alignment processes, redesigned performance systems, and reconstructed psychological contracts. The most effective approaches share common elements. They acknowledge meaning as personal and subjective rather than organizationally defined. They provide agency rather than prescribing meaning. They embed meaning making in structures and processes rather than treating it as episodic initiative. And they demonstrate authentic commitment through resource allocation and leadership behavior rather than merely rhetorical acknowledgement. Building sustainable meaning infrastructure requires long-term commitment. Distributed meaning-making structures, adaptive purpose evolution, and developmental pathways responsive to shifting career stages represent investments that pay dividends across employee life cycles and organizational performance horizons. Several actionable takeaways emerge for organizational leaders. Recognize that meaning misalignment exacts real costs even when performance appears adequate and employees don't explicitly complain. The penalty accumulates in reduced innovation, elevated turnover, and cultural hollowness. Create legitimate pathways for meaning-aligned work through job crafting support, purpose project time, and recognition systems that validate meaning-oriented contributions. Make impact visible and connections tangible between daily work and ultimate beneficiaries, helping employees construct meaning rather than relying on abstract mission statements. Support values discovery and alignment assessment as regular practices rather than one-time recruiting activities, recognizing that both organizational contexts and individual values evolve. Build distributed meaning-making capacity rather than concentrating it in leadership or human resources, enabling peer communities and cross-functional amplification. Acknowledge that meaning sources vary across individuals and career stages, permitting diverse pathways to purpose rather than imposing monolithic approaches. For individuals navigating meaning penalties in their own careers, the evidence suggests both agency and patience. Job crafting research demonstrates that even constrained roles offer opportunities for meaning-aligned modifications. Values alignment processes can clarify whether misalignment is fundamental or addressable through role evolution. And recognition that meaning priorities naturally shift across career stages can reduce self-judgment about changes in what feels fulfilling. Ultimately, addressing the personal meaning penalty requires acknowledging a fundamental truth. Humans are not merely economic actors optimizing income and advancement, but meaning-seeking beings for whom work represents a substantial portion of waking hours and identity formation. Organizations that recognize and respond to this reality will increasingly hold competitive advantages in attracting, retaining, and mobilizing talent. Those that continue treating meaning as epiphenomenal to real business concerns will face mounting costs in a labor market where capable people increasingly refuse to accept the penalty of misalignment.